Taiwan's defense ministry is reporting a spike in Chinese military activity around Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ. The data shows that since January, China has been increasing the number of military aircraft it sends to put pressure on Taiwan. So far this year, there have been more than 1,700 incursions, which is more than last year's total. Analysts say that China has ramped up its military activity since President Lai Ching-te took office in May. For more on what these Chinese military trends mean for Taiwan's security, our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to Ben Lewis, co-founder of PLA Tracker, an open-source database that tracks China's military presence around Taiwan.
So Ben, looking at information about Chinese military planes coming into Taiwan's ADIZ, it looks like we've already surpassed the total amount of incursions from last year. We've already beat that number this year with only 8 months into the year. Why is that significant, and what does that say about the severity of the situation?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, looking at the numbers, the entire amount of Chinese military aircraft tracked inside Taiwan's ADIZ in 2023, we've beaten that in 8 months. And 4 of those months, there was almost no activity at all because of the stand down that the PLA engaged in related to Taiwan's presidential elections and then the period in between the election and inauguration. The vast majority of the violations that we've seen, these aircraft flying, few dozen miles away from Taiwan, are since May 20th, since President Lai was inaugurated. That's an unprecedented surge in activity. The tempo, the intensity, the scale is unlike anything we've ever seen before.
Looking at data about these incursions, it looks like there's a steady uptick since January of 2024. Coincidentally, that's also when Taiwan's presidential election took place. Is there a direct correlation between that?
I think so. I mean, I think the initial increase at the start of the year was from a very low point at what would be considered below average numbers of activity, gradually up. And then starting with President Lai's inauguration is when it really skyrocketed. So I think the relationship there is quite clear. Well, so far, that's been the case. Every month since May, the number's gone up. We had 437 last month, which is the second highest ever. The only time that's been beat is August 2022, when we had the largest military exercises ever in history around Taiwan. So in terms of scale, we've hit an unprecedented level. Whether they can sustain that, the PLA, or whether they want to sustain that going into the U.S. presidential elections remains to be seen. But as of right now, based on current trends, I have reason to believe that it will.
Well, Ben, with so many incursions happening, and we're seeing an increase year on year, sometimes doubling and tripling of the amount of incursions that China is going into Taiwan's ADIZ, why are people more concerned about this, and why isn't it a bigger deal here in Taiwan?
I think it's the tyranny of the 24-hour news cycle, if nothing else. The Chinese do this every single day. And when you're sending 10, 15 aircraft a day, eventually 10 or 15 aircraft aren't scary anymore to the public. And then you bump that up to 20, 25 every single day. Eventually 20 or 25 aircraft are not really going to get your attention. When I first started working on this, the kind of consensus among colleagues I was working with it on was that, 10 or more aircraft was a big deal. And so, I think normalization has been one of, if not the primary goal of Beijing with these activities. I think they want to make it so that people don't care that they have a near permanent military presence around Taiwan, because it suits their objectives very nicely. So my concern is that, from where I sit, not a lot of actions are being taken in terms of how to counter these activities. And obviously there are limits, but I'm not seeing a lot of proactiveness in Taipei or Washington, for that matter, on how we deal with this unprecedented and status quo altering surge.